All right, I have accosted and I have officially sequestered Abby Martin from the Empire Files. So if you guys grew up watching her stuff, she's old, I can confirm. No, I'm
This
kidding.
is a comedy show,
No,
man.
it's more of a casual sort of.
Oh my god.
So Abby Martin's been covering the various conflicts in the Middle East, particularly the genocide in Gaza and Palestine in general, and the occupation. So we're glad to see a lot of faces at this conference that we know. But a lot of times with these kinds of conferences, there is a cynicism that you keep getting the same kinds of people. Like we want, it would be ideal if we had the people who were naysayers over here. Would they ever show up to one of these things, you think?
I mean, I think this conference is mostly for reinvigorating the community and motivating us to continue our work, because it does get very isolating and atomizing, especially in the system that we live in the Western world, and with the American media being so complicit in the genocide. So yes, I agree that, of course, I wish that Zionists were here to see the war crimes and have it put in front of their faces. But I think above all, it's really helping me actually and inspiring me to keep going.
Right, because you guys depend on online journalism and online reporting, there's been a lot of digital suppression on platforms like Meta and YouTube. Have you experienced any of that?
I have, yes, and we know that Zionists also are heavily embedded in X and Meta. We know that every American media institution, that these so-called papers of record, they have IDF soldiers, their children are in the IDF, they have literal Israeli spies working there, but of course they say if they hire Palestinians, it's too susceptible to bias. So of course you're going to see a very concerted effort to suppress and algorithmically control the narrative, but it's not working. Instagram, Meta, and X, you're seeing it completely blow up.
Do you think it's been like a brute force effort from like a popular support across the globe, where people just sort of brute force the algorithm to keep pushing content that is in support of Palestine or highlighting the genocide?
100%. It has been entirely a grassroots effort, and we've seen this burgeoning narrative exploding from Palestinians for the first time, being able to dictate the reality themselves and no longer have Zionists controlling what they have for so long, which is the reality on the ground. Finally, Palestinians are able to show us with their own social media, and that's an incredible thing, and that is going to transform the narrative forever.
We'll get to the meat and potatoes, which is the idea of the ceasefire that's going on. Netanyahu is clearly trying to sabotage it. Do you think that this was the incoming Trump administration that sort of fast-tracked this, or there was something to do with the Biden administration as well?
Well, I think Biden is a war criminal of the highest magnitude. He clearly could have ended this on day one with a phone call. He chose to keep the slaughter going for 15 months longer than it needed to be. We know that the ceasefire deal was almost word for word what it was back in May. That's Biden's fault. I think Trump did force the hand of Netanyahu, but at a great cost to Palestinians. As we know, there's a bunch of sweetheart additions to the ceasefire, which includes being able to go back in after 42 days, annexing the West Bank, and lifting sanctions on settlers. And so it's going to be a very tough road ahead. But I think, again, the masses have awakened, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right. Do you think that this time around, was this on the ballot, the Palestine cause, or do you think it was way down there in terms of importance?
I think that it was the number one issue of why Kamala Harris lost, and I can prove it. Because the political establishment has been gaslighting us for months, that this had nothing to do with the loss. For months prior to the election, they didn't even want to mention Gaza. It was just a cursory kind of thing that they nodded along to. Oh, we're working for a ceasefire, we're working for a ceasefire. As we know now, according to a poll that just came out 4 days ago, Gaza was the top issue for voters that voted for Biden in 2020 and did not show up for him in 2024.
Right.
Number one. It cost her the election. She was willing, her subservience to Israel and the Zionist state,
Other than
they were
the
willing
fact
to
that she
lose the
was
election.
not, other than the fact that she's not a real person, and she's a million ants operating a skin suit. But do you think that Gaza was the number one issue? Don't you think that's a bit of a stretch?
No.
Why do you feel so confident that the American people or the voters found their conscience in voting for Trump or abstaining from the vote, as opposed to just voting for the lesser evil?
I think that we see clearly. I mean, the people did not show up for her that they did for Biden. It's not that the country became more right-wing. That's not it at all. I think that it's very clear that the genocide in Gaza was a motivating factor for youth, particularly, to stay home. That's clear as day.
So no third-party candidate was considered, you think?
No, because the political system's completely rigged. People know that there's no chance in hell that a third-party candidate can win. They've rigged every facet of the electoral system against them. But we saw in places like Dearborn, for example, Jill Stein got 30% of the vote. I mean, if people all mobilize behind third-party candidates, of course that would change. But unfortunately, people would choose to abstain than invest in the third-party system.
We'll switch gears a bit. What about the situation in Syria? A lot of your colleagues, especially on the left, have been, so the axis of resistance has been covering the Syrian civil war, the attempt at the coups. What do you think the situation on ground is right now?
It's not good.
It's not good.
No, I mean, Israel claimed victory. I don't want to take away from the Syrian people. Obviously, it was a moment of celebration to see Assad fall, and I don't want to take away that sentiment. But I think that we need to be realistic about what this means in terms of Israel's expansion. We already see the normalization between Israel and the new leader of Syria. I mean, the fact that they have just let Israel bomb relentlessly, seize land twice the size of Gaza within the immediate days after the fall of Assad, it's very worrisome. Because when you have the US and Israel celebrating a victory, that doesn't mean anything good for the Syrian people, and certainly not Palestinians.
So there's an argument that we will make that Syria is not a jumping platform to combat the colonial presence in the Middle East, and that the Syrian people should be a separate entity that get to decide their own fate in the future.
Of course.
And that is something that I think is universally agreed upon.
Of course.
But the problem that comes with this sort of geopolitics is that, you're involved with the region. Do you think that it's inevitable that the Syrian people will be in a conflict with Israel directly?
That's a very good question. I think inevitably, yes, because Israel has to continue to kill and kill and kill to stay in the same place. And so they're going to continue to go with their greater Israel ambitions, and that includes taking a lot of Syria. And so there's going to become a fracture point, right? That Syrians need to decide if they're going to allow that to happen or not.
Right. In closing, do you think the Trump administration or the American deep state generally is done with the Israeli project? Because there's a lot of talk about how it's too heavy a burden on their foreign policy, and we've been hearing this for the last 20, 30 years. Do you think that this is eventually going to become true, or is it true now?
I think it eventually will become true if the American people put enough pressure on the government to stop it. We see the political establishments completely bought and sold. We saw AIPAC primaried 2 politicians who were pro-Palestine in the last election. The hope only lies with the American masses standing up and mobilizing and forcing the hand of politicians. As far as Israel becoming untenable, the Zionist project support becoming untenable, right now, Israel is the most important military outpost for the U.S. It is essentially a military base. And so right now, we've seen that Zionism and U.S. imperialism outweighs everything. I mean, the U.S. has wanted its eyes on the prize, Iran. They've already talked about they wanted Lebanon, they want Syria, and they want Iran. This has been a plan in the making for the last 20 years. They see it as a geopolitical chessboard, right? And so, of course, they're going to use Israel as a means to do that. They're going to use Israel as their battering ram. So again, no, I think Trump is going to escalate attacks, green light annexation of the West Bank. He's personal friends with Netanyahu. Jared Kushner has a fucking bedroom in his house for this man. I mean, it's sick. But again, it has to come with the American people forcing their hand and saying no more. And I have seen consciousness explode in a way that I have never imagined. And for the first time in my life, I do see an end.
You've covered Zionism on the ground. You've interviewed people. Your interviews are famous, talking to regular average, everyday Israelis, sort of reflecting the spectrum of how psychotic Zionism can be and how sort of possible and normal it could be. What about the Jewish diaspora in America, in Western Europe? What do you think is the sentiment on ground over there?
It's totally transformative. Right now, polls show 25% of American Jews are anti-Zionist. We have about 19% of American Jews who are young.
Jewish people. I don't like this kind of anti-Semitism.
Young Jewish Americans, 19% of the youth who are Jewish sympathize with Hamas. 33%. 33% say Israel's committing genocide. That's a signifying factor of where the sentiment is going. The younger people have been radicalized by this, and not just this, by the election, by the complacency of the Democratic Party in continuing this slaughter.
Do you think that this kind of fear amongst the American establishment about the youth is what's forcing their hand with TikTok and the banning?
Yes.
You don't think it's a data issue? You don't think it's an anti-China issue?
I think it's that's a benefit.
It's a one stone, multiple birds kind of situation?
Yes.
Right. Do you think they'll go through with the TikTok banning?
Yes.
Do you think so?
Yes, they already said that they will unless someone buys it.
Right. And the Supreme Court recently...
it's already green-lit.
Yeah, this is at the green-lit, and you can't delay it any further. Why do you think the Trump administration was trying to delay the banning?
I didn't even know that
they were trying to delay it,
I don't know.
Then the court
Trump's a capitalist at the end of the day. I mean, he probably sees it good for business, you know?
Right.
I mean,
there's a general trend. Australia's banned social media for people under 18 or 16. America's clearly making moves with the banning of TikTok. The CEO of Telegram was arrested in France. You see a crackdown on alternative social media platforms. And if you look at the works of the economist Yanis Varoufakis, for example, the tech fiefdoms that exist are all based out of Silicon Valley.
Yes.
Even Europe doesn't have a tech fiefdom.
Right.
Except OnlyFans, by the way, which they can keep. But so the only alternative tech platforms or landscapes that exist are Chinese. Do you think the throttling of these alternative platforms is inevitable, and do you see a rise in sort of a restriction on free speech in the Western world and America?
100%. I mean, the fact that our reality is curated by tech billionaires. I mean, we are algorithmically guided by the hand of a few Silicon Valley billionaires, and they're all Zionists. I mean, Elon Musk is a defense contractor.
I will not stand for this because I might be eligible for the H-1B visa. So, listen, woman, I have to manage a gas station at some point in America, so I will not stand for this.
You could always work for Elon Musk.
I love Elon
Trump.
Musk. I will sacrifice my life for Elon Musk. Yeah, Mar-a-Lago, right. I think the garden stuff is from South America. It's usually the gas station sort of. That's us, South Asians. I'm messing with you. Do you think that this curated reality? Do you think people are aware? Is there a self-awareness in American society about how curated their media landscape is?
No, I mean that's the problem, is that people get the reality that they construct, and so the algorithm shows you what you want to see. I mean, for me, all I see is what's going on in Gaza. You would hope that people are seeing the same thing, but I think we all know that they're not. And so it's very unfortunate that everyone's siloed off into their own realities that affirm what they see on X, what they see on Meta just affirms what they already believe. And so that's a big problem that we're going to have to combat larger than social media can ever provide us the means to do so.
Right, and this is where these kinds of conferences come in, where people can meet and sort of network and then help each other work their particular territories. Habib Martin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Free Palestine, baby.